welcome to this episode of Latitude, in which we are looking at the rising tensions between the United States and China, particularly after the US has leveled allegations of spying against China and some of its nationals either studying in the US or working in the American system. And this has led to America asking the Chinese government to vacate the premises of their consulate in Houston. And in a tit for tat response, China has also asked the Americans to vacate their consulate in Chengdu, which is at the edge of the Tibetan Autonomous Region. More importantly, another piece of news that has come in is about Chinese hackers having entered and disrupted activities in the system of the Vatican, which has been happening for at least the last 2 months or more. And we have two experts who are going to help us understand the global implications of this new tension between the US and China, other than the territorial tensions that have already existed now for the last couple of months. Mr. Ranade is a former additional secretary from the Cabinet Secretariat and is now the president of the Center for Chinese Studies, Analysis and Strategy. And we have Ambassador Sachin, who is the president of the Institute of Global Studies. So, Ambassador, sir, I'll ask you to respond to a quote that I've just picked up from an article written by Zorawar Daulat Singh, in which he says China's foreign minister recently declared that some political forces in the US are pushing the US and China to the brink of a new Cold War. So is this now the start of a new Cold War, or has this existed for some years, ever since the Chinese have made it known that they intend to rival the US in every sphere?
I think there is this contestation that has been going on between China and the United States. And now it has really come to some sort of a flashpoint. We have seen all this happening even from 2018, when the trade war between the United States and China started. And we could see that there were a number of measures that were taken by President Trump against China. That fortunately got resolved, because it was not only these two countries, but other countries, India, Europe, etc., which are also suffering. But that came to a close on the 15th of January, Maruf, when the first phase of the trade deal was signed. And at that time, I think it was hoped that matters would settle down, and before the election or after the election, the second phase of the trade deal would be negotiated or signed, or at least some progress made. But I think what has really complicated matters is the onshot of the coronavirus, the pandemic. And as a result of that, whether it is on the health front, whether it is on the economic front, the United States has suffered grievously. All the other countries have also suffered grievously. And also what China has started doing is it has possibly seen this as a strategic opportunity, and it has started muscle flexing in the South China Sea, in East China Sea, in Taiwan Strait, against India, against Hong Kong, against Taiwan. So I think that is what has really led to the current state of affairs, where we have seen not only President Trump himself, but many senior functionaries of the Trump administration, Mike Pompeo or the NSA or the FBI director and the others coming in this. So I think it has been building up.
Thank you. Thank you for this overview. And I'll come to you about Mike Pompeo's statements and how, as the Chinese see it, add to the tension between the two sides. But Mr. Ranade, you recently commented to say that the shutting down of the US Consulate in Chengdu by China is well thought and severely minimizes US access to Tibet, because Chengdu is a sort of entry gate into Tibet and is an important position for a number of provinces of China in and around Tibet. But equally, there is a concern in the Chinese establishment that the US has been using its consulate in Chengdu, more specifically, and other outfits to keep a very close eye on China. But this has been the tradition for most diplomatic outposts. Their job is to gather information about the other side. So, what is new about what the US was doing in Chengdu, as against the evidence the US has provided against a couple of people that it has arrested or has found hiding either in Houston or San Francisco outposts of the Chinese are trying to take diplomatic cover. They finally come clean and then they come and say that yes, we were doing this for China. So where is this all coming from and where is it going to lead?
We need to look at these latest developments regarding the consulates in the backdrop of the rising US-China tensions. And since about 2 years ago, the United States have been pointing to increasing Chinese espionage activities in the United States. And you would recall that they began identifying and picking up Chinese descent scientists working in the National Institutes of Science and National Institutes of Health. They began identifying people of Chinese descent working in universities in high-tech areas and particularly in science labs. So they have been picking up these, and the FBI offices, in fact, every FBI office in the United States, according to their director, has cases, espionage cases running, each one of them leading back to China. So there is a backdrop to what has happened. When the United States shut down or ordered the closure of the Chinese consulate in Houston, there was a bit of surprise and few questions as to why Houston was chosen and why not the one in Los Angeles, which is the center of the Silicon Valley where a lot of things were going on and where there is a lot of Chinese activity. But by shutting down Chengdu, to come directly to your question, not only have the Chinese expressed that they are severely going to limit US access to Tibet, which they are quite worried about now because of the growing US-China tensions. They're apprehensive that there might be efforts to fan trouble in Tibet. But they also carry the memory of the chief of security of another Politburo member who has since been ousted, Po Xilai, from Chunqing, a person called Wang Lichun. He was at the rank of a central vice minister who fled from Chengdu when inquiries were going on, who fled from Chongqing when the inquiries were going on, went to Chengdu and took shelter in the US consulate there for over 24 hours. So that indicated quite clearly to them that there had been penetration at very high levels of the Chinese nomenclatura by the Americans. So that is one reason. The second reason, Maruf, is that the American consulate in Chengdu also surveys the state of agricultural production in that area, which is the rice bowl of China, and then probably adjust the prices of the goods, of the grain, etc., that they are selling to the Chinese.
Okay, very, very important points brought out, sir. I think now there is much more clarity, at least in my mind, as to the main thrust areas of US China concerns about spying or picking up information or whatever you may call it politely. But Ambassador Sachin Harsa, you referred to Mike Pompeo and some of the very clear finger pointing by the US Secretary of State on the Chinese, especially with reference to an important speech that he gave at the Nixon Center to kind of mark a turning point from where Nixon had initiated US-China relations and now where the Trump administration is looking at taking it in another direction, in which he said that securing our freedom from the Chinese Communist Party is the mission of our time, and America is perfectly positioned to lead it. What did he imply by that?
Basically, I think what he meant, Maruf, in this was that this is a contest of ideologies. Ideologies of the two countries. The Chinese Communist Party advances a Marxist-Leninist philosophy, which implies hegemonism of the world as far by the Chinese Communist Party, and it is goes for its advocates authoritarian, autocratic system of governance, while in the democracies, it is free, it is open, it is transparent. You are very right when you say that speaking at the Nixon Library, this is what Mike Pompeo said, because he said that even Nixon, when he was reaching out to China, he wanted that China should change, and that this effort by the United States and by the free world would induce China to change, because as it became more prosperous, it would open up and become more liberal. But this expectation or hope of the free world has not been met with positive results. So what he said is that America and the democracies, all democracies really need to come together to confront China, because two aspects, what he said, is either the free and open world changes China, otherwise China is going to change the democracies. And the second aspect, the quote worth mentioning is, he said, distrust but verify. What Ronald Reagan had said about Soviet Union, trust but verify. So here he says, Chinese always say something but do entirely the opposite. So here in the case of China, you have to distrust them, and after that also verify, because you cannot go on the basis of what they are saying.
Okay, so very important points brought out once again by you, sir. And I think there is a very clear divide that has now emerged between the US and the group of democracies and China, with the limited few friends, or should we call them vassals, which are bordering China one way or the other. But more on that after a break. Welcome back. We continue to have our two distinguished experts with us, Ambassador Sachin, who is the president of the Institute for Global Studies, and we have Mr. Ranade, formerly from the Cabinet Secretariat and now president of the Center of China Analysis and Strategy. Mr. Ranade, I go to you now to ask you and sort of take it a little further from the earlier point you made about Chengdu, Tibet, and how Chinese concerns are about Americans spooking their way into Tibet and what have you. But a related fact is that the ongoing boundary dispute between India and China is actually more about India's boundary with Tibet. And there is a history to it, whether you talk about the McMahon line and the McCartney line and the line of actual control. But now there are two things that come to my mind. Have we even considered putting China on the back foot with initiatives other than military in the case of Tibet, just like China is doing that with the US by recruiting people of all sorts? And one case that comes in mind is of Jun Wei Yo, somebody apparently of Singapore nationality, but was recruited by the Chinese when they made a visit to the universities. And eventually the man was on US soil and contacting people through internet and otherwise to get designs of planes and to get designs of various other security initiatives. Where and how good, I don't want you to go into specifics, are our efforts to put China on the back foot vis-a-vis Tibet?
Well, there are various ways in which we could go about doing that. I am not privy, obviously, to what is actually being done. But it is shall I just say that it is an area for further exploitation, and I would like to leave it at that. But let me say that as far as India is concerned, we have started making China feel the bite, as it were, for what they've done along the borders. And I think what we have seen with the apps, etc., is phase one. More is going to follow, and it will be a graded and graduated effort by us. As I said, Maruf, there are many things that can be done as far as Tibet is concerned. Some are where we can window case our support to the Tibetan people, particularly to the Dalai Lama, since he's here, give him more prominence, let him travel to areas of our interest. These are just initial steps. But I get what you're hinting at, and I think that is, I would rather not comment on that particular part.
Okay. Ambassador Sachin asks, the Americans fear that China has been going into an overdrive through its diplomatic outposts to steal intellectual property from the US, not just in the security space, but over businesses, universities, research centers, and there are names that have been doing the round in the media. More importantly, the Americans feel that the Chinese are at this stage going to launch a number of other initiatives with a broader network of individuals in at least 25 American cities, forget the rest of the Western world, and whether it's through their consulates, whether it's through individual networks, or whether it's through an information onslaught through computers and what have you. Do you see this now becoming the new norm?
No, absolutely. I think it has been, the indications have been there for quite some time. And Maruf, it is not only in the United States. You know, we have seen how it has happened in Australia. The Prime Minister himself came out, and in so many words he's spoken about it. It has been said even in Canada. Not to go as far as the United States. I think these are all open and free democratic societies. So it is very easy, whether they come individuals, Chinese come as students or businessmen or employees. It's very easy for them to gain an entree and gain access. But recently you would have also seen that there are so many cases in Russia where China has been found spying as far as the Arctic Circle is concerned. You would have seen that Russia declined to provide S-400, the next phase of the S-400 missile defense system to China. China, of course, has said that it is because of the pandemic. But more detailed investigations have sought to suggest that there were several people who were dealing with this who have been caught spying on behalf of China. So I think we should not be surprised that in our systems, you know, when in a system like Russia, which is also a fairly closed system, they can penetrate, then our open systems, like I'm sure in India also it is happening, we need to be more careful, we need to be more vigilant. But definitely, as far as the United States is concerned, I do not have the slightest doubt that this is very, very prevalent in universities, in business organizations, and across the country.
Okay, sir. Sir, last question, preferably a brief answer. You know, the American National Security Advisor, Robert O'Brien, has referred to even India closing down Chinese tools or social apps like TikTok. And they've said that much of the information that people pass through these tools are going to major supercomputers in China, and which is allowing China to keep a watch on you and to know everything about you. So America has been now publicly quoting the Indian initiative. Do you think China is going to lose a lot of business, market, and the ability to gather information when more clampdowns come in the Western world against China?
Certainly, Maru. Certainly. Already the Chinese have calculated that the ban by India on TikTok has the potential to cost them about $6 billion US. So they're concerned. They're also worried about the cascading effect. And now with the United States having come out with it, that they're going to follow suit, obviously the Chinese are quite worried. Let me just remind you that when the United States moved against Huawei and subsequently against ZTE, ZTE is virtually bankrupt. Huawei is struggling to survive. The Chinese technology industry has suffered a huge setback. So they are in a serious problem. But I would like to get to one point that you made about data being collected and stored on supercomputers in China. Here I would like to mention some specifics, like these small phones called Xiaomi. They have no storage capacity. All their storage is on public security computers inside China. And many of these applications, their storage is on public security computers in China, which is known. The reason why the Chinese are doing it is because they have given huge impetus to development of artificial intelligence, AI. Whereas data regarding individuals, their characteristics, their breakdown, their habits are vital for finalizing or for formulating AI data on races and genetic AI data, which the Chinese are working on. So it is something for them. It's security plus cyber related, and they have a lot of people working on it. As far as targeting is concerned, just for India and the Dalai Lama setup, there are 50,000 people busy hacking all the computers and monitoring calls.
Well, I mean, these figures should give us all a wake-up call. To start with, at least let's change our passwords, if nothing else. But thank you very much, sir, for all your information. And it's becoming quite clear that the new normal and in the new Cold War, which the Chinese ministers are referring to, it is not just going to be of military forces moving in the high seas or in the mountains, but there is going to be a lot more stress on the economic and technological factors which have propelled all these countries into top dominance in the world. But the importance is now to guard whatever you have and guard it very seriously. Thank you very much for your wisdom and thank you very much for watching. Until our next episode, goodbye.